The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for signing in to engage in this wonderful webinar today. We will be talking a little bit about TPE webinar on campus interviews and negotiations, campus interviews 101 and negotiations. For those of you who attended TPE in LA, I hope you had a great time and you're excited about the next phase of your journey in this job search process. And so we're going to get started right away. A little bit about me. So my name is Larry Nurse. I serve on the Candidate Development Committee, and I was also in LA this year, and it was really, really great. And today we have two wonderful presenters that will be sharing with you a little bit about this particular topic. We have Christina Olstad, and she'll share a little bit more about herself, as well as Tom Ellett. They're two wonderful student affairs professionals that will share a little bit more of their insight about this particular topic. And feel free to engage in the conversation. We have some time for questions at the very end of the presentation, and feel free to submit your questions and we will get to them at the very end. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over right now to our two presenters.
All right, thank you, Leary. My name is Christina Olstead, and I currently serve as the Interim Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs over Housing and Residence Life at Towson University. It's Maryland's second largest university, located in the Baltimore kind of metro area. And I have been in the field now, this is going on year 19, and I'm very excited to share my different experiences with prepping for on-campus interviews and also the negotiation process today with you.
And good afternoon, my name is Tom Ellett. I serve as the Senior Associate Vice President of Student Affairs at New York University. I oversee the Housing and Residential Life Program, Student Conduct, Center for Student Life, and Research and Assessment for Student Affairs. I also have an appointment for University Programs, which is our pre-college and high school program, and I am on the faculty of the HESA program at NYU.
Great. All right.
Today, our outcomes for the webinar is really focused on helping you provide some tools to be successful in the preparation for that on-campus interview, and then to how to negotiate. Hopefully you'll understand and have some more clues on how to stand out in the field. You'll understand how to learn how to avoid some common taboos, as we call them, and then some skills to engage with us in terms of the skills you'll get for specific questions about preparing for an on-campus interview and the negotiation phase. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our professional background, what we currently do, we've already mentioned. But in terms of a pathway, I think sometimes it's helpful to understand where we came from. I have a bachelor's in English, and I went on to get my MFA in directing of theater. Yes, I wanted to be a Broadway director. But the reality came that the best running Broadway drama is actually in residence halls on college campuses. So I think I direct the biggest drama there is. Part of the work that I do, I am a first-generation college student, went to a community college. I was an RA at Fordham University, so I used residential life as a vehicle for something else. So I came in saying, wow, you can get a degree in this field and work in it and study something differently. Did get very involved in regional associations. I was the past president of MACUHO, the Mid-Atlantic College and University Housing Officers, and the past president of ACUHO-I, the Association of College and University Housing Officers International. And in terms of where I've worked at 1 year at Utica College in upstate New York, 9 years at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., 5 years at Syracuse University, and for the last 17 plus years at New York University. Christina, how about you?
All right. So I mentioned that I've been in the field for close to 19 years. I started at a small private Lutheran liberal arts college in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am originally from Minnesota. And my major, I was also a first-generation college student. I majored in social work. I wanted, the university I went to promoted that they educated teachers, preachers, and social workers. And I fell in love with the field of social work. And what I found was similar to what Tom had mentioned, that I was really able to utilize my social work skills in residence hall environments. And so I also saw a way to pursue a degree. When I got my bachelor's degree, I was hired at Augsburg University to serve in residence life with a collateral in student activities advising, and was there for 5 years while pursuing my master's in social work part-time in an evening and weekend program. And when I finished my MSW, I had an opportunity to look to continue in the field of student affairs or to move into social work. And due to my experiences and my connections in the field, I felt that this was a great way for me to utilize my social work skills and to make a big difference. And so I love working in the residential environment. I've been at Augsburg University for a little over 5 years, or about 5 years. Then I went to University of New England and was there for 2 years. Then University of Vermont, where I pursued my doctorate in educational leadership and policy studies, and was there for a little over 5.5 years. I also had an opportunity to serve on semester at sea as a staff member on a shipboard campus, and we spent 2.5 months in the Mediterranean. And then I received my position at Towson. I started at Towson a little over 6 years ago as the assistant to the vice president for student affairs. So I worked to support students in crisis, students of concern, and within my time here at Towson, really have been able to grow different programs. And when the opportunity arose to serve as the interim assistant vice president for student affairs over housing and residence life, I accepted that challenge and have really been invigorated within housing and residence life in the past 8 months in this role. And so I myself am launching my own search in and of itself to not only apply for the current position that I'm in, but also to see what's out there nationwide. So I'm in the process that we'll be talking about today.
Next question is, and I'll let you start off, Christina. What has been your experience in preparing for and participating in on-campus interviews?
Sure, Tom. So I've had a lot of experience preparing for on-campus interviews and getting ready. One of the things I pride myself on is researching institutions to determine if I see myself there, if I see myself being able to contribute to the Division of Student Affairs, if I see myself reflected in the values of the university as a whole. One of the things that particularly excited me about Towson when I started to do my research was that it's a growth institution. It's a growth institution for the state of Maryland, and with being a growth institution, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of excitement on campus, and I was really drawn to that. At the University of Vermont, when I went on campus, for those of you who've been to Burlington, Vermont, you know it's the quintessential college town. Lake Champlain is gorgeous. I mean, they brought me on the campus tour, and I come around kind of on Main Street, and then all of a sudden you see the lake and the mountain. I mean, it's just picturesque. So I've done a lot to prepare for on-campus interviews. As I mentioned, I'm currently navigating that process as we speak. And, one of the first things I do is I look at the top-level leadership of an organization and see what are the institutional priorities for that the president is laying out. How does the Division of Student Affairs fit into those priorities? I look at the Division of Student Affairs and the leadership within the division. Who is a part of the Vice President's Council? And I've had the opportunity now here at Towson to serve on the Vice President's Council on Student Affairs for over 6 years, and I'm looking at what are the types of things that make institutions unique, add value, how they're promoting student success and retention, how they're serving underrepresented students, how they're serving first-generation students. on campus, and also transfer students. We have a large transfer population here at Towson University, and so looking at where are the priorities of leadership. When you get down to, the search itinerary for the on-campus interview, I look at who am I meeting with? What is their background? What are their passion areas? What are things that they've done within their roles so that I can ask informed questions when I go onto campus. And I'll have specific questions for each group that I meet with. So I really pride myself on doing my research because, at this stage in the game, I'm married, I have a wife and a 15-month-old son, and I want to make an informed decision about where I'd be moving my family. And so, what does my family think about the moving process and the different institutions that I'd be looking at? For me, getting ready for the on-campus is everything from the research process to then preparing out, what am I going to wear? Is it a multiple day interview process? Am I going to have to bring, multiple suits to the interview? Am I driving or am I flying? I personally get airsick, so I prefer to drive. But that doesn't mean I won't get on a plane. It just means that I would prefer to be in control of driving because I get airsick. So I know that about myself. I think one of the biggest indicators for me that helped me decide on Towson was the president's page. The president at the time, and now we've been through several leadership changes since, because I've been here for a little over 6 years. The president at the time was well loved by students, was connected to the campus, passionate about Towson University, had laid a path forward for where the university was going and how we impact the surrounding community and the state of Maryland. And that was all very exciting to me. So, I look top down to see, what are the experiences. And when I go onto campus, I ask specific questions to the students that I meet with too. It's very telling when you go on campus, how many students you get to interact with, how many students you get to see. I've been known to go and kind of off script, check out the campus, talk to students, get a sense of what it would be like to be there and what the student experience is like. So I'm very passionate about student success and persistence, and and also financial literacy. So I always want to know, what are some of the exciting initiatives that are happening on that campus around those topic areas. So it's a lot of research because you're making an informed decision. Can you see yourself there, and can you see yourself making an impact for the foreseeable future? Tom?
Let me give you a couple of just my experience. I've been a candidate through search firms and not. I've interviewed over 1,000 candidates in 33 years of experience. I've worked at big places, so I interview lots of people. I've been chair for some of those experiences, and I try to understand when I feel welcomed and when I don't feel welcomed on a campus. And I try to make people, as candidates, feel welcome on the campus. So, one of the things is really to think about it. Christina did a really great job and thorough job of answering the question, but I would say the welcome process. Think about how you have designed your processes for staff, and you want to be feeling that way when you go to a campus. And if you don't, that would certainly be a red flag. But we'll talk about red flags in a little bit.
So one of the things I did want to mention too was that I have been in searches with search firms and not with search firms, and it's a different level with a search firm. Different level of references, different level of background check, different level of involvement. And so, that's something too to kind of weigh out. There have been positions that I've applied for that, have not gone through a search firm, and just the experience is a little different. One of the things at the University of Vermont, we really prided ourselves on making candidates feel welcomed and making sure that they were well informed about what the experience would be like at the University of Vermont, because it was in Burlington, Vermont, kind of a remote area, and while it's a bustling college town, the nearest city was Montreal. So looking at, how do you feel welcomed, and can you see yourself in that environment? All right. So when you think about reflecting after your TPE experience, if you join TPE in LA, think about what employers are you excited about potentially working with? What employers stood out to you? What do you want to know more about? What did you leave the interview wishing you had an opportunity to explore a little bit more with the current employees at that institution? What do you want to learn more about? And do you see yourself relocating and becoming immersed in a new community? We are in a field that at times people move. I mean, we're a highly mobile field. I myself have lived in Minnesota, Maine, Vermont, Maryland, and my wife and I, we've talked about where do we see ourselves living next. And I think that you need to be in tune with what you're looking for in a community. Because now, I mean, kids are a game changer. Like I said, I have a 15-month-old. We're looking for schools now. That didn't even cross my radar when I bought a house in Baltimore City years ago. So now I'm thinking about schools, and I'm a big proponent of public education. I was, a product of public education as well. And so looking at what does that mean in the relocation process too.
Yeah, I also think that what potentially excites you think about is the location where the institution is located exciting to you? Do you feel that you can participate in community? Because remember, your job is not your life. Your job should be a portion of your life, but it shouldn't be your life. So can you find the civic engagement located in that place? Is that exciting for you? And so that would be one of the things that I would talk about to yourself and your partners and your mentors and so forth. What did you learn from the initial interview you had? What were your takeaways? What was the scope of the conversation? What was the focus? And did you have the skills to be able to reflect that in the interview itself? In terms of prepping for the on-campus interview, there are certain things that you really need to know going into the process, and hopefully you've gotten that from talking to those that you interviewed with. What's the timeline? Have you been able to think about how that fits in with other timelines for other jobs, especially if you have your own internal ranking of which is first, which is second, which is third. Skills outline, I would encourage you to use the ACPA and NASPA competencies or any association competencies such as the ACUHOI's Body of Knowledge, or any association that is content specific such as NODA, NACA, etc. Have a knowledge of what those are, and how would you rate yourself in those, and why? Why is going to be the most important question for an on-campus interview. The why and how. Tell me an example of that competency or skill that you feel you're rated at a high or a medium or a low. You really want to look through the experiences you have as a supervisor, as an advisor, in a team-based situation, dealing with a crisis, and have specific examples to be able to share. So you may want to create your own cheat sheet for all of those different skills and competencies with an example from each of those. Also encourage you to really practice this interview process with friends, with family members, with mentors, with students. What a great way to help their learning by you being the student this time and the student being the teacher and the person asking the questions. How do you want them to know you? That's really part of the practice process. Christina talked about the history of institutions by looking at student newspapers. Go into the Chronicle and Google the history of that institution. Find out what the issues are. Is there a hazing case on campus right now? Has the university been sued for something? Is there a new initiative or a new strategic plan that's happening that they're talking about? all important things, or some national recognition for something that the institution has done. As it relates to departmental and divisional initiatives, I look at the NASPA Excellence Awards to see which institution has, if any of the institutions I'm applying for has distinguished itself in a certain area of student life. You want to look at recognition, other kinds of recognitions. Maybe who's presented. Look through the NASPA conference booklet and see who presented this year, so that it from that institution might be a great talking point. Download through the app. If you went to the conference and were registered, you have access to that, and you can pull up one of those presentations, download it, and take a look at some of the things that are happening on that particular campus. Look at what they publish as a department, or professional organization involvement. Is there anybody in the organization that's a part of NASPA Region 2, its executive board, et cetera? It will show you a value that the division or the department has in professional development. Christina talked about presidential initiatives, and that's what kind of got her excited about Towson. Well, look at the new president. Is it a long tenured person or short tenured? What's the history of the leadership of the institution? Is there a higher ed program? If so, the faculty, what is their discipline? And what are they focusing on in terms of research interests? And preparing for success, as you prepare, what are you going to wear? I often tell the story of my interview at Michigan State University a long time ago, and 18 years ago. And I got on the plane wearing shorts and cut-off shorts and a T-shirt that was ripped. It was a hot summer day. Carried my water bottle and so forth. Got there, the plane landed, and guess what? They never put my luggage on the plane. And my interview was at 8 o'clock the next morning, and we landed at 10 o'clock at night. Luckily, the search firm company representative was on the plane, and they brought me to the local store in the Michigan. Christina, help me with the name if I forget it. Do you remember the name of the store? I told you.
Oh, yeah, it was one that I don't quite remember.
Yeah, it's one of these 24 hours. It reminded me of Walmart's, but it's open 24 hours a day. And ended up having to buy slacks, a shirt, a tie, and loafers for the interview. Of course, I wore the Michigan State University colors. But what are you bringing? And make sure you have that extra bag with you that you need for clothes, etc. Bring some Benadryl if you need to sleep on the flight if you're flying. And then think about, what advice would you give to them about their organization, should they ask you that? And also some advice about the position and your experiences. So have all of those things prepped. Christina, you have some other ideas, I'm sure.
Sure. So one of the documents that I actually utilize to prep for on-campus interviews is what's called a skills outline. And the skills outline is pretty simple, but it walks me through what is this position required, and what are for the job responsibilities, and what have I done. I want to tell my story. I want to drill my stories down so that there's no question about answering the prompts that they give me. So, when I think about crisis, there's going to be a question around crisis if you're in housing and residence life. And so there are certain stories that I pull upon that of how I have responded to crisis situations. And I've got many of them that I can draw from, but I kind of read the crowd around, well, what types of crisis response are they looking for? With practice, one of the things that I used to do is go out for ice cream with a trusted colleague and just talk about what kind of questions I'm going to get asked and my responses. We actually used to do it in a really nice outdoor setting, just to kind of talk out what I was going to say so that I was ready for that. Now, other things to prepare for success, I think it's important to know, I cannot stress it enough, you need to make sure that you ask questions that will get at your interest areas, help you make an informed decision, because remember, you are looking for, can you see yourself there? And they're looking for, will this person thrive here? Can we see them here? And so you need to ask questions to get at that. I remember when I went to the University of Vermont for my on-campus interview, they had given me all these materials to look over in the hotel room. And that night, I read through all those materials, and the next day I asked a specific question about one of their new initiatives or programs that was listed in those materials, but you could not find on the website. And the search committee was surprised, like, oh, you read about that? And I said, yeah, it was in the materials you gave me last night. It sounds like a really exciting program. And I ended up being able to work to support that program in my time at the University of Vermont. So I think it's asking really good questions. You know, one of the things that Tom had mentioned was about the HESA program on a campus. And I've worked on campuses that have HESA programs and campuses that do not have HESA programs. And I find the environment so invigorating when you are surrounded by graduate students, by faculty who are researching trends or presenting. You know, at the University of Vermont, we had a professional development series in housing and residence life, and so we often had a strong representation at national conferences and presenting, and that's something that, you know, Towson, we're working towards that, but we do not have a HESA program on this campus, and there's a distinct difference to campuses that do and campuses that don't. So, you know, I think looking at what are you looking for and how can you make an informed decision about that next step? You know, one of the things also that drew me to the University of Vermont was their doctoral program. I knew I wanted to pursue a terminal degree, and I had researched that program prior to my on-campus interview. And so, you know, I even mentioned it in one of my on-campus interviews, and the person I mentioned it to was in that program currently and said that that also drew her there. And we connected around that, and we both ended up being alum of that program. So there's a lot of different things that you that I encourage you to look into. You know, I love Tom's story about leaving all of his clothes or his clothes not making it on the plane. You know, one of the things when I fly, I always take my interview suit on the plane with me. I don't ever check it, because I've heard horror story after horror story about that happening. So I always, in my carry-on, pack a change of clothes, and then I always have my shoes that I'm going to be wearing with my suit, and I always carry my suit on with me, just as a prevention method. And I'm sure Tom does that now too.
I do, and it was Kroger's that I went to, by the way.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yes, Kroger.
So
Okay.
much. I can't remember the name.
You know, one of the things I also do is I look at traditions. And there are some institutions that are steeped in tradition. And, you know, one of the traditions that, and some of them can be destructive traditions. You know, I went to an undergrad that had a tradition of around drinking, the excessive amounts of alcohol. You know, at the University of Vermont, one of the traditions is the naked bike ride. And you know what? I worked 11 of those. So, you know, figuring out what types of traditions the university has and what your role would be in navigating those traditions as well. So I always look for institutions that have a lot of pride, that, you know, for my next step, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for large amounts of pride, strong traditions, HESA program, you know, just to have a sense of what are you looking for in that next experience or that first experience outside of graduate school. All right, so you have arrived. What to expect? Well, it really depends. Typically, the first night is a little bit more low-key. You'll probably have dinner with members of the search committee. And this is a great time for you to connect, but remember, you're interviewing. Even though it's not an official interview, you're a part of that interview weekend. You know, as soon as you actually step on the plane, like I love that Tom shared that the search firm consultant was on the plane with him. Expect that as soon as you head to the airport. You know, I'm in the Baltimore area, and anytime there's a national conference and I go to the airport, I remember I am on. You know, if I wear my Towson University Housing and Residence Life jacket, I always represent Towson University Housing and Residence Life, even if I don't have my jacket on. So that's something to be mindful of. And, you know, think about how you're treated when you arrive. You know, there are certain institutions I've gone to where they'll have a gift basket at the hotel, where they have materials for you to read. They'll meet you at the airport and take you there. I've had institutions where they've sent a town car for me at the airport. So it just really depends. But to pay attention to how you feel about the institution. Also pay attention to what types of questions you're asked throughout the day. You know, I interviewed at an institution where every single interview I had, they asked the exact same question about navigating a highly political environment. And so that was a clue to me that, you know, it's really important to navigate a highly political environment at this very large public university. So that was something, it was like a sign that was something that was very important for the next person in that role to be able to do successfully.
Other things, you know, I think that you have to think about when you have arrived. It is your responsibility too, if they don't ask you about dietary restrictions, and then the whole thing about reviewing the itinerary. You know, hopefully that night before, if you haven't gotten your schedule in advance, you certainly want to Google the people that you're going to be meeting with. Look at the safety reports on the institution, and do as much as preparation as you can even while you're there. Dinner out can be an adventure, and make sure it's a good adventure. What to eat and what not to eat. Christina and I talked a lot about this. Spaghetti would not be on my list of things, even though I really want Italian food, or that's where we're going that evening. Stay away from things that are going to slip and fall over your body. It can be a long dinner, so make sure you have lots of things to talk about. I'll never forget one interview where we had a candidate who just had nothing to say. And it was one of the hardest interviews because myself and my partner, who was interviewing with me, had to really draw things out of the candidate and just ended up having to talk to each other. And then they would join in. The candidate would join in from time to time. But make sure you have interesting things to talk about as you have dinner with members of the search committee or representatives of the institution. Gizmos and gadgets, you know, it will tell you something about the institution. It will say we have money to place into these things or not. So you have to read into it what you believe you need to read into it. But I think they are important things to think about, and how you're treated. I often tell candidates to look around while you're on campus. What are the artifacts? What do they value? Do you see statements of the vision statement on the walls? Do you see it lived in their programs and services? Do you see it and lived in by the students? Is the rhetoric that you saw in all the handouts you were given actually lived at the institution as you interact with the students? And remember, you know, you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you.
One of the things I just want to highlight briefly is the dinner out. You know, one of the ways for you to actually be able to eat some of your food is to ask really good questions for the individuals out to dinner. So that's a good strategy that I've utilized in the past. But also, I remember one dinner I had, and it was with two individuals who would be direct reports, and we were talking and having a great time and asking questions and actually getting pretty deep. And one of the staff members said to the other current staff member there, "Wow, I feel like I know you so much better after this dinner." And I was like, "That's interesting." Yeah, it was a note that I took with me that they had worked together, but had never really talked about the things that we talked about, which was telling in and of itself. But yeah,
really,
yeah. All right. So one of the big things is you need to ask questions of the search committee. There have been times where, we've conducted searches, or I've been the chair for a search, and a candidate will not ask any questions. And that indicates to the search committee or to the chair that they didn't do their research, that they were not informed. And, it's really important for you to ask questions of the search committee. So Tom and I got together, we came up with a few here. Like I mentioned, I always pay attention to who I'm meeting with and ask specific questions about partnerships, collaborations with those specific areas, things that individuals are proud of that make their division or department unique. What does success look like for this position in 90 days or a year from now? What are people who have left gone on to do, and the average length of stay? I think that's really important for some of those entry-level positions just out of grad school. What brought you to the institution and what keeps you here? I remember when I asked this question at Towson, individuals were saying things like, wow, I came to Towson, I thought I'd be at Towson for 3 to 5 years, and it's 15 years now. And so there is something happening here at Towson that people want to stay, to be a part of the growth that's occurring. And, we have phenomenal students here at Towson University, so that's another reason why individuals stay. But each institution has a different feel of what brings people to it and what keeps them there. What is the overall financial picture of the institution and the division? I know Tom and I, we were talking about institutions that if you pick up the Chronicle, smaller private colleges and universities are engaging in a really difficult decision making around, do they close their doors, do they stay open, are they financially viable, and that has a very different feel than being at a Towson University that's a growth institution, that we are building buildings, we are attracting students. And so it's important to realize what the financial picture of the institution and the division is. One of the things I always pay attention to, because I went to a small private liberal arts college, which has now changed its name to university, but I pay attention to the endowment, where the endowment was, where it is currently, how they're very tuition dependent, and what the impact is of the first year class. I always pay attention to those types of things, and I encourage you to do the same if you're searching at some of those smaller institutions. And then, what is the commitment to develop staff members in the field? You can get a real good sense of this when you go onto campus and through your research. What Tom mentioned, are people presenting? Are people writing? Are people getting published from that institution? What are they known for? I can say, coming from the University of Vermont, we were known for being innovative, focusing on restorative practices in residential education, and a strong commitment to social justice and inclusion. That's the same today as it was back when I was at the University of Vermont. And, they were just presenting at ACPA and at NASPA about that. And so, it gives you a real good sense of what is the commitment. And also, at Towson, I'm sending my staff to NASPA, I'm sending my staff to the Student Success and Persistence Conference, I'm sending my staff to the Assessment Institute. Where are the staff being sent? And, how are we harnessing that knowledge back on campus? So I can get you a real good sense about the division and where they're putting their money and how they are developing professionals in the field.
Great questions, and I would encourage, if anyone has other questions that we should be posting on here, why don't you put it in the chat box or in the questions box, and we'll add it and share with everybody at the appropriate time of other questions you've used that you think are really good that we should be sharing with the other folks on the line with us today. Follow up. Well, you made it through the big interview, hopefully without any scars and hopefully with lots of good experience, and reaffirming this is the place you want to be, or confirming it's not where you want to be. Again, this is your choice. No one has a gun against your head saying you have to take this particular job, and I would encourage you not to take a job that you don't have that feeling in your gut and the feeling in your brain that you can be utilized to your fullest potential and that you would grow and develop. Because there are a lot of jobs out there. Though it may not seem it, there are a lot of good jobs for talented people who want to be hardworking. So as part of the follow-up, you really do want to leave that long-lasting impression. And so I'd always say jot down impressions as you're there on the campus and jot them down as you leave. Keep it fresh in your mind. Make sure that you have the feeling that you had while you're on campus and put it in writing so you can remember it when you're starting to match one institution to the other. It also helps for some of those memories when you follow up with your thank you note to say, hey, I really appreciated when Sarah took me on that tour and showed me this part of campus, et cetera, et cetera. Lasting impressions on the search committee, you want to smile, you want to be there. Great handshakes make a big difference. Have at least 2 questions that we mentioned in the last slide. Know yourself. Prepare for a very strong interview with standard replies to some of the questions you know you'll be asked. Thank you notes. Should you email or should you write personal notes? I think that's a personal preference. I know for some, if you go through a search firm, you'll probably want to do an electronic version and send it to the search firm for the first round and let them pass it on to the people you interviewed with. Maybe you make it to a second round and you get to meet with people individually and the search firm isn't present for that interview. You probably will want to do more personalized emails or written letters. I will pick on Francisco Cordero. I don't know if anybody knows him out there, but he worked at NYU, its Housing and Residential Life Department, a couple of years ago. And I will never forget, he sent a handwritten thank you note with a quote that I had used in the interview. And said, you know, this quote really impacted me and here's why. I mean, I've never met another candidate who impacted me in such a profound way after the interview as Francisco did. Utilize your network to validate your on-campus experience. You know, there are regional connections you may have had, maybe former bosses or former students in HESA programs that you could reach out to. I certainly wouldn't put it on Facebook or other social media, hey, I just was at X institution, what do you think? But I would certainly feel free to use your backdoor networks to help you get more things less public about that institution. And finally, for me, it's really about debriefing with your mentors. Know what you are non-negotiable about for the position. Talk with people who ask good questions rather than just people with opinions. Good mentors will ask questions. They won't tell you what to do. They'll help you find a process in which you will answer the question yourself. Christina, do you have other follow-up things that you would add?
Yeah, one of the things, and this actually ties in before or after the interview, you know, for example, if I'm going to go on campus and I know individuals who've worked there in the past and have moved on, but have had positive experiences just based on our conversations, I'll reach out to them to say, you know, any insights you can provide me. I'm a finalist for this position. And that's how I get some of my best insights. Because they have been there, they have worked with the team there, and they've also lived there too, so they can talk about the community and be really honest with me about what it's like to live there. And I also think, you know, finding what your non-negotiables are and how they change over time. You know, for me, during my last search, it was a non-negotiable. I had to be near a major airport for direct flights home to Minneapolis, just based on where I was at in my life and where my family was at. That is not as high on my priority list as it once was. Looking for, you know, my last search, I really wanted to be in a large metro area, I ended up in Baltimore. Now, there's a part of me that, my next search, I wouldn't necessarily have to be in a large metro area. So, because I've lived all kinds of different places. So, and again, now one of the non-negotiables for me is good schools for my son. Like I said, non-negotiables change over time. So I think that that's something to really be in tune with. I've seen worksheets that help staff figure out what are their top, 5 things that they're looking for in that next institution. And is the institution that you're interviewing with on campus meet those 5 things? And if not, what are you willing to give on? All right, understanding total compensation. So there's a lot that goes into the compensation package in addition to the salary. So at times, salary is negotiable. At times, it's non-negotiable. I always recommend to ask for more, to try and negotiate for salary. They will tell you if that's not possible. If it's not possible and there are other things that are possible, let's say relocation expenses, putting you in an apartment for a certain amount of time, looking to get your spouse employed as well. There's all kinds of different things that an institution can do if they are excited about you and your candidacy. Benefits, one of the draws at the University of Vermont, just besides the Division of Student Affairs, was the educational opportunity for me to pursue my doctorate up there. And so pay attention to that. Is that something you're interested within the next few years? That may be important and part of your non-negotiables. What kind of healthcare package is offered for staff? What kind of retirement contributions? It's all over the map now. I've been at institutions where they do 10% contribution to retirement. I've been at institutions where it's 5%, institutions where it's 7.25%, 8%, like it's all over the board. But that all adds up over time. And so paying attention to what are the retirement contributions. Professional development. Is there specific funds for professional development? What's brought onto that campus? What's offered out of human resources on that campus around professional development? Also within the state, region, and nationally, are they sending staff to places? Have you seen staff from those institutions at those places? And other additional perks. One of the things here at Towson, we have a state-of-the-art fitness center that was recently renovated and is free for faculty and staff to utilize. So it's better than any health club in the area. So that's an additional perk that saves individuals money. Does parking cost on campus? Parking is incredibly expensive at certain institutions and a cost of 0 at other institutions. So there's a huge range there. So that's something to pay attention to as well. Also looking at the taxes within the individual states, like is your income taxed? At what rates? How high is your income tax? Because that can have a lasting impact as well. I've got a colleague who just moved down to Texas a few years ago, and it's a different level down there than the amount of taxes that I'm paying here in Maryland. And so all of that adds up. Also cost of living. What are you able to afford based on the salary and benefits package that you're offered? And what is the cost of living in that area? So be really intentional about thinking about what are the costs associated with uprooting and moving to this area and establishing yourself somewhere new. So with apartments, if you're moving into an apartment, you've got first month, last month rent as a deposit typically, and depending on the community as well. But taking a look at and understanding what, is your cell phone paid for? My last few positions, I have never had to pay a cell phone bill because it's always been covered by the university. So pay attention to that. It all adds up. So that's what I would recommend when looking at the total compensation.
A couple of things I would add is never take a job solely on the money, because it's never worth it. If you don't really have a shared set of values, then it's not ever going to be worth it. Tuition remission can sometimes be taxable, sometimes not, depending on if your job is required to have some of those skills so you could go back for more education. The other one I would add is, does your campus have international hubs or campuses abroad? I know through my NYU experience, I've been able to see the world, a lot of the world, on NYU's experience, in terms of their financial commitment to me. I've gone to our campus in Abu Dhabi 7 times. I've gone to Paris and Prague and Sydney and London and Berlin and Buenos Aires. So I've gotten to see a good portion of the world. Is an institution that you're going to go to have those opportunities for you as well. And the last one I don't think we really talked about much was moving relocation. Sometimes it's about being close to partner, family, friends, but also is relocation a part of it? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. So just something to think about in terms of total compensation.
I think one of the things too, there are certain institutions that will give you educational leave when you get to the dissertation writing phase. And they have staff sabbaticals, so that's something to pay attention to as well. Also, I benefited from this at the University of Vermont. They provided me a leave so that I could go on semester at sea to see the world and return back because they saw it as added value within their department. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there, and I think it's important for you to look at that total compensation. Like, Tom, man, that's awesome. You've been able to travel all those places. How exciting.
Yeah, it's been great. And I think I've learned a lot, and I think I add value now to our international students on campus because I have some of the knowledge of what it's like to be from Europe, Australia, the Middle East, and South America.
Definitely.
Getting to yes. Well, this is what we all want. We all want to be able to say, yes, I want to be there, and for them to say, yes, we want you to be there. But make sure that your values are aligned, that you are really in alignment with what their direction is, that you're going to be able to have a work-life balance that you are feeling like meets what you need. Make sure that your content area is something that they will value. Etc. Make sure that you feel comfortable with the compensation package, because once you get in, that's your base pay. It's not going to change. It's your base pay, and it's hard to move over time. Know what your non-negotiables are, as we've talked about previously. Know the surrounding community and job prospects for your partner in positions, and value add for the institution. What are you going to do and be for that institution as you go forward? Christina, do you want to add something? We have some questions and just a few minutes left.
I think one of the biggest things here is, those of us who work for state systems or state schools, our raises are directly tied to what happens in the legislature and the budget that gets passed by the governor and the legislature. So there have been times at Towson University where we've gone years in a row without raises. And so that's why that second point of making sure you're comfortable with the compensation package is so key. Also looking at, one of the things at Towson is there's a lot of teaching opportunities that add value. So I'm adjunct faculty out of the College of Education. I get to teach a course. It helps with additional income, but also it's a great experience, and I love being in the classroom. So looking at what are some of those other opportunities offered within the campus as well. Like here at Towson, we have intergroup dialogue program that we bring into classes, and the intergroup dialogue instructors get additional pay as well. And so I think there's opportunities on different campuses. When I was at the University of New England, I was able to be adjunct faculty out of the psychology department. So and it's all through just making connections on campus that those opportunities have happened for me. I didn't seek them out; they came to me. So and it's through building those networks that you get some of those additional opportunities on that campus. Yeah. So I know we do want to leave some time for questions for you, and there have been some questions coming in. So Leary, did you want to read through some of the questions?
We did have a question earlier about, but that was pertaining to after the interview. So currently we don't have any on the board, dashboard, but we can definitely share some insight again as to possible things that they should be aware of as a candidate.
I see a question regarding how to navigate conversations where institutions give you a timeline to commit to, but you need more time. My only feeling about the timeline is really honest conversation, and to let the institution know, hey, you're the top of my list, or you're second on my list and I'm waiting for one other. It could come back to haunt you, but you know what? Honesty in the long run in our profession is going to come back to help you time and time again. It's a small field, and you may be interviewing that person who treated you really badly, or the person who treated you really well on a search committee where they're applying for a job at your institution. So I would always err on the side of real honesty between the places that you're interviewing and your timeline. Christina, any thoughts on that?
This is the how do you navigate conversations where institutions give you a timeline to commit, but you need more time?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you just be really transparent about what you need. And if you're their top candidate, oftentimes individuals will work with you.
Yeah.
I know I've worked with candidates who said they need to talk with their spouse or they need to, you know, iron some things out before they can commit. Now, for the if you're talking about timeline for on-campus interviews, sometimes they don't have a lot of wiggle room because there are so many people that they're trying to get together and clear their schedules. So that can be a real challenge too.
How about the question about exactly how to word asking for more as far as salary? For me,
go ahead, Tom.
For me, I think if it's a deal breaker for you, I think you have to ask the question for more salary, and you shouldn't go if you can't take the money, if you don't feel it's enough to live on. Christina?
Yeah. So I'll give a personal example. So a colleague that I know was offered a base salary and asked the question. You know, I was really hoping for more. They gave a higher number. And then they met in the middle. So, you know, and they would have never gotten that additional money if they just took the first offer. So you never know what the possibilities are. You know, for me in my role at Towson, you know, I was actually kind of blindsided on my on-campus interview because I was on campus and the question was asked to me, what is your minimum starting salary? I was not expecting that question at an on-campus interview. I was expecting that when an offer was actually on the table. And so I said, that's hard to say. I don't even know the range of the position because they didn't post the range of the position. And then they told me the range, and I said, well, I already make more than that. So this is what I would need to make. And then they met me at that. So, you know, you get a real sense of, are you the top candidate? Do you have negotiation, wiggle room? What will they do for you?
Okay. We did have a question with regards to how, I know we are just about out of time, but this one was, when do you decline an on-campus?
Oh, sure, I've had to do that. So when I decline an on-campus, and I've had to do this for institutions that we hit it off. It was, it's tough to decline on-campus interview offers because, you know, it's flattering and it's exciting, but if you physically cannot see yourself living in that location, and it was, for me, it was a position where, my wife and I had talked about, what would it be like to live here? And then when it became real about the on-campus, she said, I really can't move there. And so listening to my spouse and saying, okay, and withdrawing from that search. And that was difficult, but I let him down, and, I let him down with kindness. I said, I really enjoyed our opportunity to connect. And I was authentic. Like I had a blast interviewing with them. But at that point, and I told them, that in conversations with my family, this is the decision that we made, and it was a difficult decision to come to. So you gotta give them some information about why you're declining, but also let them down gently too if it just wasn't the right fit for you.
And like I said, we're just about out of time. But one question that I think is pretty relevant is what happens when the website doesn't give you a lot of information about the institution?
Yeah, that's telling.
Yeah, I think that's telling, right? I mean, if there's not a lot of information, you do the best you can, and you go, and you might even say that you could certainly follow up before, while you're doing your investigation, send an email to the hiring agent saying, hey, is there more information that you could provide to me that will help me prepare for the interview? Without saying to them, and by the way, your website is really pretty lax. You don't add that part, obviously. But I think you can appropriately ask if there's materials that you could borrow. Student newspapers are usually online. You should be able to find almost every student newspaper online.
One of the questions that was also asked was, how many on-campus interviews does an institution typically do for a single position? I would say anywhere from 3 to 5. I would say 5's high end, 3's low end.
And I know there was a question about search firms. They're out there, but they usually are for higher level positions. So I wouldn't worry about search firms for entry level positions. Even middle level, there's a little bit of it, but not much. But the search firms, they're out there. Just do a Google. I'm not going to list any because that would be inappropriate to be giving free airtime for a search firm. But if you type in higher education search firms, I think you'd find a whole bunch of them.
Also, you'll find them at our national conferences.
Great. Well, I think that is, I can't say thank you enough to Tom and Christina for sharing such a wonderful insight on what it means to navigate the on-campus interview, as well as how to negotiate that particular job that will be in your best interest. And so, again, thanks to all of you who took the time to sit in on our webinar today. I sure hope that your job search process continues to be a fruitful one. And before you go, there are just 2 more webinars that we have that the Candidate Development Committee will be hosting. And the next one will be on Thursday, April the 14th, which will be Navigating Campus Politics, What to Expect in Your First 90 Days. And for those of you who might be doing a dual search for both you and your partner, that will be on April the 18th. And so continue to check in with our webinars that we're presenting for you. Just so you know as well, these webinars will be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can look out for them within the 24 to 48 hours, and you can get additional information. If you have any questions, feel free to still contact us at the Candidate Development Committee through the TPE website, and we will answer any questions that you might have. Again, thank you to Tom and Christina, and have a great and wonderful rest of your day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.